You're watching The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Hey, everybody. It's Tuesday. It's time for another damn Wickline show. We're going to talk about Sandman, episodes 7 through 9. We got Kyle joining us. But the big news today, they found a new Red Sonja. Yes, Red Sonja is going to be played by Matilda Lutz from Revenge, Wallace Day from Krypton, and a few other shows will be on there as well, and Robert Sheehan from the Umbrella Academy. So that's the big news, and we all know that's going to make Nick happy over at Dynamite, because Red Sonja movie will help the comic sales a lot. So, all right, let's get going. Stick. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Dan Wickline Show. I am your host, Felix Castor. That joke is for like 3 people out there that like Mike Carey novels. So, all right, we are going to jump right into it today. We're going to go into talking about Sandman. Hey, Edward is ready. He's finished it, even the new episode that dropped. So we are going to talk about that today. And to talk about it, we're going to bring in Sandman expert and Living Beard, Kyle.
I was going to see how long I could hold it before I laughed at the Living Beard comment. It was not as long as you would think.
Yeah.
And then I was trying to come up with a joke about how I'm only a Sandman expert because the only thing I'm actually good at is sleeping. But also that didn't come to me fast enough. I had to start talking before I could finish the joke.
It's all right. We don't come to you for your speed.
No one ever has.
Only your ex-girlfriend.
I was going to say there are multiple entendres on that joke that we should just walk away from.
Yeah, no, I had to throw one out there.
Yep. Fair.
All right, so we spent last Tuesday talking about Sandman, and by we, it was mostly Kyle talking about Sandman. There are a lot of people out there calling it a perfect adaptation, the best adaptation ever, and I don't know. I thought it was good. I wouldn't say perfect. I have some issues. I think they seriously underplayed Fiddler's Green. We should have gotten quite a bit more Gilbert so that when it's discovered who he is, we care. I love the casting. I really liked the character of Gilbert in the series, and I think he was just not given enough screen time. I found that I ended the series liking the Corinthian better than Sandman. He was very charming, and kind of, you know, they really didn't make him seem like that much of a menace, and we only see him kill like 2 or 3 people in the entire thing.
I'm still hung up on the people say it's a perfect adaptation.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of people out there calling it a perfect adaptation. And I don't just mean fans. I mean YouTube content creators and stuff. Heavy spoilers literally called it a perfect adaptation.
That's incorrect. I like the perfect adaptation. Like maybe Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is a perfect adaptation of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. But there's never been a perfect comic adaptation of a comic. It just hasn't happened.
The only perfect comic adaptation is the mid-1960s Marvel animated things that they took straight from the Jack Kirby comics, just put voices to.
Yes.
Because that literally was. Sin City, JD points out Sin City is close.
And 300's not bad.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I would say the Frank Miller stuff is maybe the closest for real. Spirit wasn't bad, but it wasn't close.
But there's common ground there because Frank Miller was adapting his own stuff. Here, Neil Gaiman is adapting his own stuff. So that part of it makes a lot of sense when you see the person who actually wrote it and is making the changes. Because let's be honest, it is impossible to take a comic book and put it on the screen, on the TV screen or the big screen 100% the same way. There are changes for the medium that just has to be made.
Right. And we've gone around about this before, Dan. Like, I think this is the way, if you're going to make a comic book movie or TV show, this is the way you have to do it. You have to bring the original writer of the source material in, and they have to be doing it. Now, we've gone round and round about it, and I have since changed my view on this a little bit because Jason Aaron did work on Thor, Love and Blunder. But so I've softened my view on that, but then Neil Gaiman you have to bring in the original creator of the source material who also has the skill to do it for television or movies. You can't just throw somebody on it.
Well, I think it also has to be, when you're talking about someone who is like the heart and soul of a book,
right?
If you're talking about someone who came in, did a handful of issues, and then moved on, it's not that big a deal, at least in my opinion.
No, I mean, like I said, I've softened on the, I've softened on it, but I've also changed the, the view. What up, Alec? Triple B. There's a lot of folks here. What's up, everybody?
Edward,
I did want to shout out Ed.
Yeah.
He's more prepared for the show than I am this week.
Edward says, even novels, they always have to change parts or leave parts out to put it on the screen. One of the interesting is when they adapted Jim Butcher's Dresden Files for television. It was very different than, but what they did, a pilot that was very much straight from the comics or from the novel. And then they did regular episodes, and the regular episodes actually worked better than the pilot episode they did, which they showed later on. But
was it just me, or am I misremembering? Was that show not that good?
It wasn't great, no. But if you had read Dresden Files and then watched the show, you hated it. If you watched the show and it led you to Dresden Files, you're fine with it.
Right. I think I had read some Dresden Files and then watched the show and was like, this show's not good. And then went back and read the rest.
Yes.
Paul Blackthorne was great.
Yes. Paul Blackthorne was great. And I liked the guy they had playing Bob, even though Bob the Skull is not supposed to be an embodiment of a person or embodied by a person. The actor who played him with this very saucy British accent. And then I got to see him interviewed outside of it, and he's Southern. Like, wow, you don't see that often.
True.
Yeah.
So, we decided we were going to talk about, what did we decide, 7, 8, and 9 today?
Yes. Yes.
So that is the Rose Walker storyline, if you aren't paying attention.
Yeah. Why do you think they killed off Miranda?
I don't know that she added too much to it. In the sense that, I didn't think Miranda Walker, the mother, character in the book was all that thought out, right? It really was Unity and Rose. And if you're going to cast someone who is more capable to play Unity, you don't really need Miranda, right? Like, because in the book and in the audio book and in the regular book, to me, Unity Kincaid is bedridden, unable to really function, like, because she's so old.
Yeah.
Well, if Unity can pick up a cell phone, then what do we need someone to go to the hall phone for?
Yeah. Okay. Fair
Right?
enough.
Like it's one of those things is that it's she's a catalyst, not really a character. Whereas now the catalyst can be technology. Right? So to me that's not as big of a thing. I had a bigger problem with, if you're not going to use her, with replacing her with Lyta Hall.
Yeah. Yeah. They moved the whole Lyta Hall story.
And my kind of take on that was, I don't know how they would do that on screen. Like, I don't know how you portray that part of the story.
Yeah.
You know, they did an okay job of it, but without actually having Brute and Glob, I just don't know.
Because the Gaunt wasn't the original one, was it?
Right, it was Brute and Glob.
Yeah. Which are kind of silly names.
It was, yes. And this is the thing. As I'm thinking about it now, right? I wonder if part of that problem isn't their inability to use Hector Hall, the Sandman.
Hmm. Well, but they did use Hector Hall, and they did use the Sandman costume, and they did use images of Flash villains. So it's
true.
really
I just wonder how much they were able to use. That was my question, right?
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know, oh, you can use this if you don't say the name, and it's just this thing kind of in a costume. And then, oh, if you put the little boy in the Sandman costume and not the grown man, well, then that's okay, because now it's just like a Halloween thing.
Mm.
You know, like, I wonder what the negotiations look like.
Yeah. So this is going to be kind of interesting. I rewatched the first 6 episodes this weekend before watching the rest of them. And I did that because Lisa came down and hung out, and she hadn't seen them. Now, Lisa's didn't read the audiobook or hear the audiobook. She hasn't read the comics. And her familiarity is very loose with the DC universe. You know, she's seen Aquaman, she's seen Shazam, that kind of stuff. When we got to the episode with Constantine and Rick the Vic, her response was, well, she didn't seem much like Constantine. When we got to the episode with the devil, though, what turned her off surprised me, because I didn't think she even had this much of a knowledge of the universe. But when they referred to Mazikeen, she turned to me and said, why didn't they just use Tom Ellis and Leslie Ann Brandt?
I think we're going to keep going around and around and around on that.
I know, but I'm saying this is somebody who I wouldn't have expected that from.
And I think and in my rewatch, this is what I thought. And it would have taken me out to have Constantine from the TV show, to have Lucifer from the TV show.
Mm-hmm.
It would have I would have been trying to immediately draw lines. of, okay, how do we get to the Constantine TV show from here? How do we get to the Lucifer TV show from here?
Yeah. But see, that her reaction was the opposite.
Right, I understand.
I didn't think she even knew the connection between Sandman and that. But she saw the Warner Brothers logo in the beginning, and when she saw Mazakeen, she expected to see the woman from the TV show, and she made the connection.
Right. No, and I understand that. Like I said, I don't think there's a right answer. I think is what we're learning is that for someone like me, I no longer am following your plot. I'm no longer paying attention to your show.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to figure out how are you going to connect this to these other worlds you've created elsewhere.
Yeah.
Whereas by casting other people, it lets me stay in this moment. I can worry about those things later, but it lets me stay in this moment.
Mm-hmm. Whereas
for a different level of fan, it turns into this, well, wait a minute, that's not who that's supposed to be. It would be like inviting someone over to watch Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And the only doctor they've ever known is Matt Smith and showing them Peter Troughton.
Yeah.
That isn't who this is supposed to be. And it's so different that it doesn't feel right. But then to somebody who knows that the doctor changed his face, I can stay in that moment and recognize that this is just a different doctor from a different time.
Yeah. I thought it was fascinating because, like I said, I didn't think she would have made the connection between Sandman and the Lucifer TV series.
Well, I don't know how many people know, the connection.
Well, and that's my point, though, is this is somebody who I would have said wouldn't know.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
And she may not have realized it until Mazakeen popped up. That might have been the trigger.
Right. No, I mean, but that's what I'm saying. I'm considering it now.
Yeah.
Because to me, it made perfect sense recasting those roles.
Yeah. And what's funny is I didn't have a problem with the recasting. I had a problem with the choices in two different ways. I didn't think Jenna Coleman really brought across the a-holeness of Constantine. And I just didn't think Gwendolyn Christie was really that good in the role.
On my rewatch, I can kind of agree with you on Gwendolyn Christie being a little off for the role.
Yeah.
I quite like Jenna Coleman as Constantine. But on my rewatch, I can see what you're saying. Again, my big problem is, in spoilers, Hell's a triumvirate in the book, and it's not in this.
Yeah.
Or at least it's not perceived as one.
Mm-hmm.
Which, having it be not perceived as one is a problem for me, because that means Lucifer has to look that much stronger. Mm-hmm. And when Lucifer didn't, now you've got this kind of dichotomy that you're trying to figure out and play with. So, but those were the first 3 episodes, right? The first, 6 episodes.
4. Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Lucifer's in 4, yeah.
Right. I mean, the 3 we were supposed to talk about today, 7, 8, and 9, are their own, like, if this was a modern comic, would have been their own separate miniseries.
Well, yeah, but 10 would be part of it as well. Because he doesn't actually...
What happened in episode 10?
He confronts the Corinthian.
Just a sec. I need to look at my actual... Okay, yes. So, yeah, it's 7, 8, 9, and 10. The last 4 episodes would have all been part of their own miniseries.
Yeah. Okay, looking at...
And so that's something I was talking with Brendan Wall, who is the host of the Fat Jacks show here on The Experience, about. And one of the things we were talking about is how, and I think I mentioned it to Ed in the comments on Friday, The thing about Sandman is that it's about the individual stories and how Dream interacts with them. So what happens is you get these very rich interactions with sometimes a very weak starting point and a very weak ending point, because Dream isn't there at the beginning and he isn't there at the end. He's just there in the middle.
Now, see, I agree with you when it comes to the audiobooks, but I think in a lot of ways, Boyd Holbrook as the Corinthian, by introducing him early and having him pop up, became a through line through the whole season. But the problem is that he is so charismatic, and they really don't spend the time making him nearly as creepy as I would have expected. That when he's doing stuff like taking out Funland and getting Unity and Jed to the hotel room and stuff, he actually comes across as kind of a good guy. And you've got these little moments, but there's so little of him actually being the serial killer. Even the eyes don't really come across nearly as creepy as they do when they're described in the audiobook.
Well, and in the comic, he doesn't come across nearly as creepy as you would think. And I think that's the thing, right? We're talking about a nightmare. And nightmares aren't nearly... I don't know how you feel about when you have nightmares, if you have nightmares. They're not nearly as creepy when you think about them as they were when you were having them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem with the Corinthian being the through line, is that now we spend a lot more time thinking about the Corinthian and a lot less time experiencing the Corinthian. If the Corinthian shows up in episode 1 and tells Roderick Burgess how to imprison Dream, and then we don't see him again until what would wind up being episode 7, when he goes and gets Jed, essentially. And then they're at the cereal convention, but we know what the cereal convention is.
Right.
It turns into a whole different thing. Right? If maybe we see, there's a scene in the book where he picks up a male prostitute or something and, eats their eyes.
Yeah.
Like, if we see that and then we're just at the cereal convention and we know he has Jed, it gives the character more...
But there were moments they could have done something, like when he hooks up with the guy house sitting or apartment sitting for Rose. He could have killed him, and instead he doesn't. Now we need to take a break. Before we jump in, though, Edward, I want to say the cartoon cat piece and the one with Ray Calliope are part of the comic series, along with 2 other. They were kind of like bumper issues or just little standalone issues that came along in the comic series. There's one with William Shakespeare doing A Midsummer Night's Dream for the people actually in it, those kind of things. So
we'll talk about those next week, though.
Yes. So let's go ahead and take a quick break. We will come back and continue our chat on the Sandman. Be right back.
Thanks for tuning into The Experience. Help us out and hit subscribe over on YouTube and click the bell when you do. Need some help? Scan the QR code in the bottom corner. Who would win, Batman or Superman? It's the age-old debate, except it's so much more complicated than that. Nerd Killer Warfare every week on The Experience is your chance to debate other nerds in the questions we've all been asking for years, except we take those debates and turn them up to 11. Go to bit.ly/EXP casting or scan the QR code to be part of the show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dan Wickline here on The Experience. I'm suddenly become Ed
McMahon. Not Ed McMahon.
No.
Ed Sullivan.
Ed Sullivan. Really big shoe. We have a really big shoe today. Actually, I'm doing Mike Myers doing Ed Sullivan. Edward. We never did get to see him eating the eyes, which
I don't think that's something you want to see on television.
But it would have given more fright to the character by sanitizing him. You made him kind of a nice guy. So, hey, Mark, glad to see you're here. Before we jump back into the conversation, though, the rest of this week we will be talking about the She-Hulk premiere tomorrow. Also, my theory of how Bruce Banner found out about Cap losing his virginity. It's not the way you think. And we'll talk about Only Murders in the Building season finale with the amazing cameo that pops up in the last few minutes that leads into season 3. And the big star who is now joining the series. So get a chance to watch that. I stayed up till midnight to find out who actually did the killing. So, all right. Let's get back into Sandman talk with Kyle, the human beard. Let's see. Was that how he ate the eyes, with his teeth eyes? Haven't made it that far in the book yet. Kyle?
No comment. I don't want to spoil stuff. Like, I realize...
Yeah, but he's asking.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how that works.
Yeah. And they could have done it in like just have him pick it up and hold it up to his eye and then film it from back here.
Thoughts on a Sandman lock and key mashup?
I don't know.
I know that Neil and Joe Hill would love to work together. That's what I can say.
Yeah. I don't know lock and key well enough.
I think something would have to be written. Like, I don't think there's anything in existing Lock and Key or existing Sandman that would be a good merger point, right? Something specific would have to be created to do it. Here's the problem, Ed, and I think this is the mistake we're making when we talk about the Corinthian. He's not supposed to have a solid role.
But they gave him one.
Right. This is a mistake that was made in the show.
Mm-hmm.
In that they made the Corinthian too important. Right? And in doing so, they kind of minimized the importance of what is Rose Walker as the Vortex pulling all the dream together. Right? Like, the whole idea, and they talk about it a lot, is that the reason Gilbert winds up where Gilbert is, and they wind up at the cereal convention, and that Galt is looks like Rose's mom and is with Jed is because Rose is the vortex. She brings them all together. It's not some coincidence. And conversely, by making the Corinthians seem more important or bigger or more fully thought out than Fiddler's Green as Gilbert, than what would be Brute and Glob or Galt, depending on the, which we're talking about. Mm-hmm. It means that all of a sudden this dream is more powerful than the others, and it's not. Right? So Corinthian is supposed to be this dream that has been maybe the first one to leave the dreaming and go out in the world and be a thing, but no more prolific than the other two. And the show, by the nature of having to have a through line, did that. And it's a mistake. To solidify a character that in a future season will likely have to be played by someone else is now going to set up a whole bunch of, well, why isn't it the guy from the first season?
Does the Corinthian return?
He does in things like Sandman Overture.
Okay.
He does in things like Death, the High Price of Living, High Cost of Living.
Okay.
Not in Sandman Direct.
There's no guarantee there's a second season of Sandman. Gaiman's very clear about that.
But what I'm getting at is if the Corinthian is to come back, he has been uncreated by Dream. So he would have to be recreated and would therefore likely be cast by someone else.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if he makes a new version of him, that would make sense. But as long as you explain it. Edward says the way they left it, though, it was like, okay, the mouth eyes are cool, but why? Why bother having him show those to us when we didn't get to see? Yeah. See, I'm with you.
Why create a character who has mouth eyes? Right. Like it's kind of this concept of if that, then this is kind of the argument y'all are making. Mm-hmm. A nightmare is what a nightmare is. You don't have to know what a nightmare does to make it scary. And the idea of for me of going out and showing the Corinthian killing a whole bunch of people, or to actually show him eating the eyes or something, to me is again just filling out a character that doesn't exist anymore. Right?
But you're talking about the problem is that the Corinthian doesn't really come across as a nightmare.
But neither does Galt, and neither does...
But Galt at that point isn't being a nightmare. She's a nightmare that is trying to protect Jed.
And the Corinthian's a nightmare that's trying to not be a dream.
Right, and Fiddler's Green is a dream, not a nightmare.
Right. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying, is that we're getting into distinction without a difference territory here.
No. See, but that's the thing is, when you have your basic bad guy for a show, just from a storytelling point of view, see, you're looking at it from the comics. A lot of people are looking at it that, 77 million people have watched this show, and there's a good chance 70, 80, 90% of those people have never read the comics. This is their only experience with it. And you're not creating, the way they did it, the Corinthian is the bad guy. We had John D in the beginning, but he was like the small boss, and you had to work your way up to the big boss. But they didn't make him a bad guy. They didn't bring the evil to him. And then I realize that they're adapting the comics, but you're also looking at, there were things they did in the comics to make him more menacing. Things that he did, the way he killed, there were opportunities to do those things in the series to give him some weight and some actual menace and they didn't take those. And it's surprising to me that they didn't, especially with how they went ahead and did a lot of what John D did in the diner. They could have done those things with Corinthian, and they didn't. And in doing so, you make him a likable character.
I don't see the Corinthian as the bad guy. Dream is the bad guy.
But it's not as clear to people who haven't read the comics. And you end up with this muddled thing in the show.
You end up with a muddled comic book. I mean, the comic book, you have to read 25 issues into this comic book before you start to really see, oh, this is how all of this actually lines up. Right? Like, the first volume of the comic book is very muddy. Because the interactions between these characters is not, I'm a good guy, I'm a bad guy, like it is in a stupid Superman book. Like, you know, if Dream wore his underwear on the outside, I could say, okay, now we need to find out who the bad guy is. But in any given situation, the nuance of this comic and this show are so much higher than that.
But what they did with the changes they made, and we're going to throw out the terms good guy and bad guy because they don't work and they're not really applicable here. Morpheus is the protagonist. The Corinthian is the antagonist. And in a lot of ways, Desire is the overall antagonist. But we spend so little time with Desire that, you know, for season 1, it's the Corinthian. You know, it's kind of like the Riddler in Hush. Hush is the bad guy for the series, Tommy Elliott. But you find out that the Riddler is behind it all. You know, it's not. But Riddler isn't really the bad guy. He's just the mastermind.
The problem is, and this is the problem. Like in this sense of, we're only basing it off of the 10 episodes or 11 episodes that we've seen. There is no good guy. There is no bad guy. There is no antagonist. There is no protagonist. Every story, the roles change. Sometimes Dream is the antagonist. Sometimes he's the protagonist. Sometimes the Corinthian is the antagonist and Dream is the protagonist. Like, sometimes those roles are true and sometimes they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And the prime example of this, I think, really is in these Rose Walker stories, where you have moments where the Corinthian is the antagonist, and then you have moments minutes later where Dream is going to kill someone and becomes the antagonist. And all of this is because Desire is pulling the strings on all of it. Who is the real antagonist of all of this?
Right.
And just because you only get a minute with them at the end of the show doesn't mean it's not true that they weren't the problem the whole show.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because there's a point I thought maybe Desire had actually got Roderick Burgess to even do the, that was behind Roderick Burgess even trying to capture Death in the first place.
Yeah, they never really explained that. I think that would be a nice way to do it. You know, he desires to bring his son back.
Right.
Like, I don't think that's a bad. I think if they would have set that up, instead of bothering to make the Corinthian into something bigger than the Corinthian was ever intended to be, it would have been a much better way to do that.
I think the first episode is slow as hell. I think the next 3 are some of the best because it's clear, Morpheus is going after his tools. He's trying to get them back. You have a protagonist. You have a situation. It's when you start getting muddier, they don't really make it clear to the viewer. And in doing so, I think that's the weakness in the series. I think that they really didn't take the time to explain much. And, we didn't get that much time with Fiddler's Green. So we don't really see the difference between a dream and a nightmare. We really don't get that, at the end we find out that Morpheus is doing his job to kill the vortex, but we really don't get that that's what he's trying to do. You know, it doesn't really shift to him becoming the antagonist. It's set up, and it is supposed to be. It works that way in the comics and the audiobook. It doesn't come across. So it's like the second half, they really didn't delineate those things clear enough to make it come across that we were no longer looking at Morpheus as the protagonist and Corinthian as the antagonist. They didn't delineate those things enough.
And that's fair. As Nick calls me in the middle of the show, he knows I'm on the air. Anyway, I think that's a fair problem. That's a fair assertion.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't do a good enough job of explaining that the roles of these characters change almost as it's like real life. Sometimes you're the antagonist, sometimes you're the protagonist in real life.
Yeah.
Right? Like, depending on your interactions with others. They didn't do a good enough job of explaining that, which I think is fair. But again, I think the problem that we're having is that so many people latched on to a throwaway character because they chose to make it a place for you to latch onto. That when the character gets thrown away, you're like, but wait, why didn't they do these things? When the reality of it is that if you would have, what difference would it have made?
But what we're saying, and I say this from a we as in the collective people who they made the changes.
Right.
This isn't the exact book. It's not 100% a pure adaptation. They made the changes to give us the Corinthian in the first. I don't remember the Corinthian showing up at Roderick's house. I could be wrong.
No, the Corinthian doesn't show up until the 8th issue.
Yes. Actually, I double checked that. It's like 7 or 8. Yeah. So they brought him in. They have him meet John Dee outside of the asylum. They bring him. They make him the antagonist for the series. And in doing so, they shifted it. Okay. They and you're working with a different audience. So when you do that, you need to make, the fact they didn't give him any menace is they made these changes, but then they took out something as simple as the murders he did in the comics. They take those out too. For what reason?
Right. If it were me
Uh-huh.
and I'm just speculating. I think it's because they probably realized that far in that they had built too much on a character that was going to go away and never come back.
But he doesn't go away till the 10th episode. So,
but I'm saying he's going to go away and never come back. Like, that's the end.
Right.
So if you've built a show where all of this stuff is attached to him,
mm-hmm.
right, where people are looking to him to be the antagonist going forward, and that at the end Morpheus goes like this and he's gone forever, you immediately start trying to find a way to write yourself out of that corner.
But they weren't in a corner. What they did was, from a storytelling point of view, they made him the antagonist. They could have done one or two things during the show to make him more menacing, like kill the house sitter, maybe kill one other person. And then at the end, give him just a little more screen time where he's a menace to Dream when Rose is away or is dreaming and he's got the power to hurt Morpheus. Then you've got standard storytelling. It's the end of season 1. You take him out and you introduce the big bad of Desire. You've got standard storytelling there.
If they'd have done that, I'd be on this show right now talking about how this is the worst travesty that's ever been created in comics.
But they did.
That's the problem. They would have then separated themselves so far from the original intent of the character and the story that it would be like calling a movie Civil War and then not telling the Civil War story.
But see, that's what I'm saying is somebody like Ed Weird is out there And that's exactly how this show worked for him. It's exactly, the Corinthian was the antagonist. If they would have, just made him a little worse, made him a little more menacing or malevolent, no one would have said anything. Because it's standard TV structure, standard series structure. He became the antagonist.
The reason I love Sandman, the 100% the reason I love Sandman is that it is so much more nuanced than every other comic that was on the market at the time and it's on the market now. It is so reliant on the specificity of the storytelling and the nuance of the storytelling that when you start to abandon those things, it becomes infinitely less good. And that's why when I talked about my problems with the first 3 episodes of not having Ruthven Sykes go with Ethel Cripps and not teach John Dee about magic and these things that that we find out later about these characters that they've left now. Oh, thank you, Brainy. These things that they've left out that now they can't do. Right. And now they're bringing the Corinthian in 8 episodes earlier than it ever would have normally happened.
Yep.
And they're giving you a bigger taste of a character that's not supposed to be a big taste. And they're all of a sudden they're changing. It's like the equation for me is it's like they're making pancakes and all of a sudden they're adding way more eggs than they're supposed to. Right? Like you're starting to mess with the actual formula that makes this work.
Yeah.
And
but they did mess with it.
Right. So the things they can do, like not giving more reason to have more Corinthian, is good because it gets you back closer to the right formula.
But the fact is they made those changes. They went down the path. And in doing so, they're kind of in that middle ground where they've created an antagonist for the season with what they did, but they didn't give enough menace. All right, we got to take our other break real quick. So we'll be right back as I let Kyle stew for a minute on his thought. So we'll be right back.
This is The Experience.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hey there. Hi there. Ho there. You're as welcome as can be.
Hi, I'm Nancy McCann. Welcome to Friday Night Live on The Experience.
Welcome, everybody. It's Fat Jack's Comic Crypt. Brendan, Al, Jason, hanging out.
There I am. Welcome back to Kicking It with Andre, folks. I am your host, Andre Kumpa. It's great to be here with you guys.
So we are going to talk about books that are in stores this week.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Mishmash.
Hello, and welcome to the Black Comics Universe, presented by Peep Game Comics.
And you gotta love it that the first people in the minute to skim it are creators.
Up, everybody! Welcome to another Wednesday Warriors. My name is Joey Galvez, and this is my pal Ambrosia.
Hey, everybody! Welcome to Space Cadet.
Hey!
What's up?
Welcome, everyone, for another episode of I Must Ask You a Question.
Hi, everybody! Welcome to Nerd News Now.
Hey, this is Rex. Welcome to Comic Collectibles.
Hey, hello, all you happy people. Welcome to the Dan Wickline Show.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is the crazy show that we do on Thursdays called What's in the Box? What's in the Box?
Comic culture and sales.
Hey everybody, I'm David Boer, the writer of Kanto, Killer Queens, and All New Firefly, and you are watching The Experience.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show. We are talking about Sandman episodes 7 through 9. Remember to stick around tonight. Miss Jen will be on with Minute to Skim It. And then Kyle, myself, and Jay will be back for In Stores this week. And one of the books we'll be talking about is by Matthew the Raven himself, Patton Oswalt, Minor Threat from Dark Horse. So you'll want to hear what we think about that, along with Book of Shadows #2, Samurai Sonia #3, Grim Fairy Tales Annual. We got a bunch of really good books this week and a couple really bad ones. So stick around for that. All right. So Kyle and I are talking about the changes to the Corinthian, and we seem to be kind of stuck on that. So I think
this is the thing. I don't think we're ever going to see eye to eye on this one. Like, I just don't think it's possible. And
I think the difference is that I'm looking at the series by itself, detached from the comics.
I am unable to do that.
And I can see that.
Well, and again, I've been unable to do that for the history of movies being made about comic books.
Yeah.
Not just this one. Sorry.
Yeah. Because I'm looking at what they did as the show, not what they did in comparison to the comics. To me, as the show, they set up the Corinthian as the antagonist, but they didn't quite make him menacing enough. He's the first season big bad, with John Dee being the little bad in the early. And by the way, two of the best actors in this show, Boyd Holbrook as the Corinthian, David Thewlis as John Dee. Just freaking nailed.
At no point should my complaints about what they did with the Corinthian in any way be reflective of Boyd Holbrook's portrayal of the Corinthian. He was absolutely perfect as the Corinthian. I don't like what they did with the Corinthian, but I think if you were going to find somebody to play him, you found him.
Yep. And what's funny is I keep coming across these characters like, where have I seen him? Oh, he was in Logan. Okay. Didn't make that connection, stuff like that. But
I was listening to an interview this week with Neil Gaiman, and he was talking about the way they kind of had to cast this show and how they had gone out and they had seen like 1,000 actors to play Morpheus. And they're like, okay, it's Tom Sturridge. And then the pandemic hit, and Netflix and Warner were like, well, we're going to be a while. Might as well see 1,000 more people for the character. And Neil Gaiman the whole time was like, yeah, but it's Tom. And so they went and saw these people, and they went back to Netflix and Warner and were like, yeah, okay, we saw them all. It's Tom Sturridge. Like, why did you make us do that? And they're like, well, might as well do our due diligence. Yeah, but we had the guy. So they were paying Tom Sturridge to sit at home and not do anything else while they looked at 1,000 more potential people.
Yeah, and I will tell you that top to bottom, great casting. Tom Sturridge, Vivian Akampong as Lucian, Mason Alexander Park as Desire, just great. Rose and Unity, just down the line. And I can't find her name, but the woman who played Death, fantastic. I thought she was great. My only casting qualms, I only have the two, and that's just because it just didn't feel right to me.
My big one is Patton Oswalt as
Matthew.
The other ones I could get past. I'm becoming around to your way of thinking on Gwendolyn Christie, but I don't even mind that so much. Death, by the way, is played by
Kirby Hal Baptiste.
Yes, thank you,
Edward. Yeah, Death was awesome. I really liked Hob Gadling was great.
Yeah.
That was such a refreshing part of the show.
Mm-hmm.
You come out of Death and the thing with Death, and you're just an emotional wreck. And then suddenly we get this fun story with Hob.
Dream's only friend.
Yeah, and I'm smiling through most of the show. Or through that part of it. So after I've just seen a baby die and an old man die, you know, we go from an Alanis Morissette video to this silly thing with this guy living forever. I don't know why it's an Alanis Morissette video, but that's what I always think of when I think of death.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So overall, I liked the show, but I think that there were some things they could have done. So is it a good show? Yeah, I look forward to a second season, but there is definitely things they could have done better.
We still have to talk about 10 and then the 2-part 11 next week.
Yeah.
And 10 really is the wrap up of the Rose Walker saga.
Yeah.
And so next week we can get deeper into the Rose Walker of it all, which it's not a small and inconsiderable thing. One thing I think they glazed over, and I felt it was glazed over in the book, I felt it was glazed over in the audiobook, and I felt it was glazed over in the series in terms of its magnitude.
Martin Tenbones?
No, Lyta Hall. Yeah. Getting pregnant in the dreaming with her dead husband, and Dream goes, "Someday I will come for the baby." The magnitude of that statement, even if it makes very little sense in the moment, is massive.
Yeah. Does he ever come for the baby?
Yes.
Okay. So he's Rumpelstiltskin at that point.
Not exactly. I mean, it's not bad, but not exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very difficult book to adapt because of the way it's written, because how the protagonist antagonist thing, it doesn't follow standard storytelling tropes. And the problem is we live in a world where most viewers expect standard storytelling tropes. And when they make changes that even fit a little more in those tropes and they fall short of fully embracing it, then people are going to complain about it. You know, because that's what people expect to see.
It's true.
So, you know.
And that's part of my, when I get hung up on this and I get angry about it, like, and I get kind of impassioned about it, is I don't care what most people want.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that I want them to tell the story the way they want to tell the story. And so if people don't understand that the role between antagonist and protagonist change, then they don't understand storytelling. At least not in the way that it's been done for eons.
But you've also got to understand that you're coming at it from having known the stories and knowing where
Correct.
they don't make it as clear in the series.
Correct. And that's part of my problem, right? Like that's what I'm getting at, is that if you don't understand the storytelling, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that also when you're going to make an adaptation and you have to think about that kind of stuff, I think you need to leave just enough in it for the people who do. And I think they did that.
Mm-hmm.
But they left, but in doing so, they made some things incredibly weak that didn't need to be.
Mark says, do you think any of the episodes are Emmy worthy? 24 Hours is a great episode. Possibly Her Wings or whatever it is. The episode.
Sound of Her Wings.
Yeah. That one. Yeah. 24 Hours is a rough one for me. And I'm getting that same vibe off of the Calliope one. Because I know I've heard that in audio form, and it was disturbing when, you know.
Right. We'll talk about it next week.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So that's going to end our conversation today for Sandman. We'll talk next Tuesday about it again. See if we can really rile Kyle up.
Well, we'll see if they stop dropping editions so we can wrap up our series of conversations on Sandman.
I don't think we're going to suddenly get a Shakespeare episode.
I'd kill for one, though. That'd be so fun.
Yeah. I just think, I think you're confusing some people when you suddenly put an animated episode out.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, Edward was saying earlier, was that really part of the show or the comics? So, all right, guys, we're wrapping it up there. I don't think we have anybody immediately following us. Okay.
Soon, but not yet.
All right. So, in just under an hour, Miss Jen with Minute to Skim It, and then we'll be back, Kyle, Jay, and I, talking about in stores this week. So stick around. We got a new format. We're going to try something new. You're going to want to see it. Smaller versions of us. Stick around. We'll see you guys later.
Join the party. Head over to our Linktree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.